Hello again. So hopefully by now you have completed exercise 7, activity 2. That was looking at those 6 foods and seeing if they had lipids, carbohydrates, and proteins. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and complete activities 3 and 4. So activity 3 begins on page 114. And what this is looking at is it's taking a closer look at the peanut, which was in peanut butter in the last activity. So this is focusing, again, thinking about embryos. So peanut butter and refried beans are both seeds, not peanut butter itself, but the peanut. Here is a diagram of, say, the inside of a peanut. So these are the same kind of peanuts that you eat, and this is similar to the diagram on page 115. So what you notice about this is you have this very large area, and this is typically what we think of when we are eating peanuts. Then you have essentially this baby plant, so to speak, that's in the peanut that's already started growing. So before we actually go any further, with this information and with this diagram, as well as the diagram in your book, you should go ahead and complete number 2. So that's at the bottom of page 114. And it asks you to label the root, the stem, the leaves, and the stored food supply on the diagram on page 115. And you can see the lines leading from that. Now again, use those words. Don't use the words that you see here in this PowerPoint right here. So go ahead, pause this, and try to label those, and we'll go through that. Now that you've had a minute to label everything, that very top line in your label on 115, so this area, that's the stored food supply. So when thinking about peanut butter, it had lipids, it had carbohydrates, and it had proteins. This stored food supply has all of that. And as the name suggests, it's a food supply. It's meant to supply nutrients to this growing seedling. The next line down, which is pointing to this area, are the leaves. So these are very, very, very small leaves that will eventually become the leaves of a peanut tree. In the middle, you have the stem, and at the bottom, you have the root. So it's essentially just a very small plant within these seeds that have the same parts that a regular plant would have. So now that you understand what the different parts of peanuts and other seeds are, go ahead and complete the questions on page 115 and on page 116. And some of the questions are related to questions that were in activity 2. So if it seems familiar, it kind of is. So again, pause here and go ahead and work through those problems. So the first question, it says that food may be stored for the use of an adult plant or as energy for the development of an embryo. The stored food is packaged with an embryo into a structure called a seed. And so that's what this peanut was. Here again we have that stored food supply. Here we have this little seedling. And all together this is considered the seed. So it says to list 3 commonly eaten foods produced by plants or animals that provide stored energy for embryos, and the note here is embryos. So last activity we talked about milk used for baby cows, but at that point that cow is no longer an embryo. The cow is out of the mother and it's relying on the mother's milk. It's not still in the mom. When it's in the mom, it's considered an embryo, but now it's been born. So other examples would be other seeds. So think about sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds. Most fruits have seeds in them. If you think about an apple. Now typically those seeds may not have a very large stored food supply. So if you think about an apple seed, those are very small. But the apple itself is a stored food supply. What we eat is that food supply. If we didn't eat it, eventually that apple would act as an energy source for those seeds in the apple. So any kind of fruit you can think of, any kind of nuts or seeds or beans that you can think of are all providing energy to an embryo. Now it does mention plants or animals, So a good animal example, and if you've already worked through the problems, you would probably have gotten this, would be a chicken egg, or really any animal born in an egg. If they're in an egg, not only do you have the embryo, but you have the egg yolk, you have the egg white, and all of those have tons of protein and lipids and carbohydrates to fuel that developing embryo. So on page 115 still, question 2, it says, which of the foods tested in activity 2 use lipids as an energy source for a developing embryo? So again, talking about an embryo, so in this case it would just be the peanut butter and the refried beans. So I'm going to flip to the next page to 116. It says circle all of the answers that probably have high lipid levels. Now lipids or fats have a lot of calories in them. And calories is good in the sense that it's an energy source, which is what you really need for these seedlings. So the first one, a chicken egg, yeah, that probably has high lipid levels because you need to give those calories to that developing chicken. A carrot, that's just the root of a plant. There's no reason for it to have high lipids. A sunflower seed, again, it has a seedling, so we expect tons of lipids. Spinach, which is just the leaves of a plant, we don't expect to have a lot of lipids. And then E and F, a coconut and an almond, both of those are nuts or are seeds. So again, they're going to have a developing embryo that they are supplying, so we expect them to have high lipids. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and go over a brief overview of activity 4 before letting you guys go ahead and work out these calculations. So what we briefly talked about this last lab, some of you guys may have already started this activity, but as a recap, I am looking on page 117 at that top table. That table has information on what the recommended percentage of our daily calories should be. So that first row is carbohydrates, and it's recommending that 55 to 60% of all of the calories that we take should be from carbs. The next the next row says 10 to 15% of our calories should be from proteins. And then no more than 30% of our calories should be from fat. Now that very last row is very important. This is information I would not give you, so you should memorize this. Is that for every gram of carbohydrates, you're going to get 4 calories from that. Now you notice that it says kcal. You'll also see kcal in this PowerPoint. You may see it in a question. It is the same exact thing as the calories that you count on a nutrition label. So kcal and those calories are the same thing. You don't need to worry about dividing that or multiplying that or anything. So again, kcals equals the same thing as calories. And you'll hear me kind of use both of those terms back and forth. Just know they mean the same exact thing. So for every gram of carbohydrates that's, say, in a bowl of cereal, you're going to get 4 calories out of that. For every gram of proteins in the cereal, you're going to get 4 calories out of it. Now fats have a lot more calories than both carbs and proteins. For every gram of fat you consume, you're going to get 9 calories. So you may think of calories as bad because everyone says you should count your calories, but this is energy. Calories is a direct measure of energy. The more calories you consume, the more energy you have. That's why athletes consume a lot more calories than most of us, because they need that energy to fuel their muscles. So I'm going to go ahead and pause here. With this information, you'll be able to answer the rest of activity 4. So you'll start by completing the table, the bottom table on page 117, and answering the questions on 118 and 119. So go ahead and pause here and try to work through these problems. If you get stuck, replay the video to go over each of the different